Hola.
Hola, bienvenidas, bienvenidos. Estamos súper contentos, orgullosos y honrados de tener a Tino aquí, de ser sede el MAZ de la exposición Tino Sehgal, con las piezas en EstaciónMAZ Kiss Clean, Kiss y Jet on Title, y además Associations, la nueva versión que está haciendo Tino especial para el MAZ, que la pueden ver sobre el andador 20 de noviembre, algo que es muy emocionante para nosotros. Y también nos da muchísimo gusto y agradecemos mucho a Tino que esté aquí. ¿Saben que es alguien del MAZ? Porque voy a hacer las preguntas en español y Tino no trae diadema. Ah. So, I'm going to say the questions in Spanish.
Ah, okay.
Sí,
Yes,
sí, lo que
we talk about this, remember? Ah, okay. I didn't know. Yes. So great, sing. Just need to turn it on, turn it off. And just click on your ear.
Y bueno, que esté aquí Tino en México también es algo muy especial. Como saben, no viaja tan comúnmente y ha estado trabajando aquí muy intensamente. Estamos muy agradecidos. Y también con todos los que han estado trabajando con él, es mucha gente. Para Association son alrededor de 90 personas, más los otros tantos intérpretes de las otras piezas, que ha sido una labor increíble. Y le agradecemos a su equipo más cercano, a Justin, a Suri, a Michelangelo y especialmente a Yassi, toda la dedicación y el compromiso. Bueno, voy a leer una breve semblanza de Tino para empezar con algunas preguntas, iniciar la conversación y luego abrir el micrófono al público. Tino Sehgal es un artista de ascendencia alemana e india con sede en Berlín. Reconocido como uno de los artistas más importantes de su generación, su aclamación crítica deriva de una práctica artística radical que toma la forma de situaciones construidas, encuentros en vivo entre los visitantes y quienes ejecutan la obra. Su belleza efímera reside en la especificidad fugaz del encuentro, donde los intérpretes suelen involucrar a los visitantes mediante su participación activa en la construcción de la pieza. Bueno, como saben, no produce objetos. Me voy a bajar un poco más. Su obra ha sido objeto de numerosas exposiciones individuales, recientemente en The Pot Museum, Tilburg, Países Bajos, en 2025, Centro Botín Santander, en el 23, Museum der Bildenden Kunsten Leipzig, Tai Kung Hong Kong 2021, estos dos en 2021, Kunsten Aalborg Dinamarca en el 18, Fundación Beyeler Suiza, Palais de Tokio, Stedelijk Museum en Ámsterdam, Gropius Bau en Berlín, en Río de Janeiro, la Pinacoteca de Sao Paulo, Ulen Center for Contemporary Art en Beijing, en Turbine Hall en la Tate Modern en 2012, en el Guggenheim en 2010. Oh, that's enough. There's a lot. Okay, well, just a little paragraph and that's it. Sehgal ha participado en importantes exposiciones colectivas, como en la 12ª Bienal de La Habana en 2015 y en la 55 Bienal de Venecia en 2013, donde se ganó el León de Oro como mejor artista. Documenta 13 en Kassel, Alemania, Bienal de Shanghái, Bienal de Guangzhou, Bienal de Berlín, de Venecia, Manifesta, Frankfurt. And I will stop because then you're going to say that I should stop. So, bueno, mi primera pregunta, tal vez esto no sea tan conocido, pero la primera participación de Tino formalmente en el arte contemporáneo fue en México, a principios de los 2000. Y entonces, platicando con él en la Ciudad de México, platicando con él, creo que me decía ayer que no había funcionado la pieza. Fue en una exposición colectiva, Do It, me decía que no había funcionado. Y hablábamos, o también lo escuché en alguna otra entrevista o leía que decía que más allá del juego sofisticado del arte, de las formas y el lenguaje sofisticado del arte, se dio cuenta de la importancia de la energía que se implica y del cuidado que se tiene que tener en esta transmisión de la energía, ¿no? No solo como tener la idea como herencia del arte conceptual, sino cómo se ejecuta esto. Entonces, bueno, y de esto hemos sido testigos en el MAZ y hemos participado de esto en el MAZ. Como es un trabajo preciso, delicado, suave, pero súper intenso, nos ha involucrado a todos en el museo, y de esto hablaremos más tarde. Pero ahora quisiera que nos contaras un poco más sobre esta experiencia en la Ciudad de México y el por qué no funcionó. Y con esto también, si quieres hablar un poco, aunque muchos conocen tu trabajo y conocen los orígenes, pero que como una introducción un poco sobre cómo de ser un economista pasaste, digamos, por decirlo de alguna manera, al mundo del arte. ¿Cómo escogiste hablar de la política y de la economía a través del arte?
Thank you, Viviana. Can you hear me?
No.
Green light. Okay. Is this too loud?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Viviana, for the introduction and for the question about my first failures. Maybe I can talk about my first group exhibition, which is true, was in Mexico City. In a second, maybe I can answer your second question first, no? But like, how did I come to this work? So, I was, let's say, when I was a teenager, I grew up in this very industrialized area, like in the southwest of Germany, where they produce really a lot of cars and a lot of computers, like industry central, industrialization central. And I lived in a bit of a higher building, and I could see, that more than half of the city was taken over by these production units, for the car company or for the computer company. And so for me, production wasn't something abstract. Also, everybody who lived in that region was either a manager or somebody working basically at the conveyor belt. Yeah. And so this whole 20th century model of like we extract resources from the ground, we transform them with like machines and labor into consumer products, which will make our life better. Like this equation was very present to me, and I was like not so enchanted with this equation. I was like, oh, if this is gonna be the rest of my life, like I'm not sure I find it so intriguing. And also a lot of my teachers at school were like in Germany, the post-68 teachers, so they were really on their mission to, teach us about the sustainability problem. At the time one called it the greenhouse effect, what was called now warming, I guess, or climate change. And so I was more politically interested. I didn't really have a cultural family, and nor was like the region where I lived, it wasn't really like a center of culture. And so I was more politically engaged, and I guess like similar to the way like then now many years later was like the Fridays for Future, like I was a teenager, I would go around and then they would invite me to speak at some kind of hearing of the Minister of Transportation, the people from the Green, not the Green Party, but the Green NGOs would ask, Tino, can you come and can you say something? It's always good to have a teenager speak and stuff. And then I think my epiphany was one of these meetings. I was like, oh, the minister is just kind of figuring out the temperature of the room, and somehow it became to me, this person is inside a democracy. He was administrating values which already exist in the population. He doesn't actually have the power to deeply make a decision what's right. You have to make a decision in relation to the values that the people who elect his party hold. And I was like, oh, that changed my thinking. I was like, the real politics is to work on values. Because people just react, or like politicians react to what values are in the population. And then I thought, oh, where do they actually work on values? And I thought, oh yeah, in the cultural field, that's like a sphere, like the public sphere of debating values, you know? And I thought, oh, that's probably the more efficient or kind of more deep way to work on politics. And then obviously in my perception, I think it's also true, I lived and large parts of the world live in a society which is dominated by the economic, you know? And I thought, okay, the economic has a sustainability problem, and I need to understand more about this. So the best way to find out about it is actually to study political economy. But I was not really talented, and I was also not 100% interested, but I thought it's the right thing to do, you know? I was on a mission, but like, my grades were also not great. And I started dance and political economy in the same week. That was like conceptually important for me, like almost like a conceptual practice. And both came from the same, so this is the answer to your question, both came from the same kind of political motivation. So like studying political economy was like to understand the society, and dance was kind of solution, like a way of production which like, you know, like I'm making something, this is something, no? But at the same time now it's gone. But you can still remember it, but it's not nothing, but also doesn't need to be recycled. So this thing, this movement doesn't need to be recycled, you know? So it's a mode of production which then later I called like, which then was sometimes a little bit misunderstood in the 2000s, but like that there's a simultaneity of production and deproduction. So like the movement, or like my words, or if we sing something, you know, it gets produced and immediately it simultaneously gets deproduced. You don't need to deproduce it, you know, like, or deproducing being a more general word for recycling something, you know. And so those were my interests, and of course I also wanted to do something embodied and something theoretical. I didn't want to be in this kind of division of, yeah, the mind, the body. Of course, like many people today, and like we didn't really buy into this, or we didn't want to buy into the separation of the mind and the body, you know, so how do you do that in a life? And so in that sense, I wouldn't say I was an economist. I studied economy, and I also only finished it much later. And then I studied dance. Also took me a long time to figure out the whole dance thing, but then I started to work as a dancer when I think I was like 23. I'd gone to the academy, then finally I figured out how to do that, to go to a proper school, etc. And then I was in a kind of, yeah, I mean the ballet world, like, I mean I went to a modern dance school, so modern dance I already found a little bit, wasn't exactly my taste, and then ballet was like really far away, but at some point I understood like, okay, this is technique, like it's helpful to learn that. And then my heroes were people like Jérôme Bell or something, or Xavier Leroy, and then shortly, already during school times, I started to work with Xavier. And so this was a field which was really taking visual art as a model, because the model of theater was very much like a collaborative model in the sense like you have the choreographer, you have the set designer, you have the costume designer, you have the lighting person, you have the music person, you know, like and the feeling at that time, maybe in the 90s, was like in this kind of group of like Jérôme Bell, Xavier Leroy, other people also like Martin Spangberg, or there were some precursors in the 80s also, but the feeling was that it didn't create coherent works of art like visual art did. And so, for example, Xavier would do everything. You know, he would make the space, he would make the light. There would kind of be no music, and it was like I don't know if you know Xavier's work or Jérôme Bell's work, but it was kind of like a very coherent work of art. It wasn't like an evening of theater. And so this was then, I was somehow mentored by them, and there was interest from the art world in them. You know, like, and then people like Jens Hoffmann, and then by Jens Ulrich Obrist, they followed what, let's say, Xavier and Jérôme and that group of people were doing. There were others which are less known now, like Alain Buffat, or like it was a bit French. And then, yeah, I was like a young person in that group, and then somehow I had done this piece which was a museum, like, so because I was interested like in this question, like why do we have a society built on production, and why are, like say me as an outsider coming from an uncultured family, I was like interested, why are our temple-like buildings places where we celebrate things? At the same time, we are a society of material production, which believes that material production will create a good life, no? And so for me, as an outsider, I was like, oh, that can't be a coincidence, you know? So and then plus with this kind of artistic scene I was part of, which was following a little bit the model of visual art. So like both politically as well as aesthetically, we were very much focused and on the art world, of visual art, on art history. I remember I could use Xavier's studio, who's like maybe 13 years older than me, and like I was like early 20s. I would go into the studio, and there were books like Licia Clark, Ivan Rayner, like he had a table, and that was normal for me. Like there was no like, I don't know, Pina Bausch book or something, you know, like it was. Those are the two I remember, but it was all visual art, you know. And then, so politically I was interested, so that was aesthetically, politically I was interested, what is up with this ritual where there's only things, and the people which are there, the museum guards, are kind of invisible, you know. So my first works, so I had done this dance piece, I did this dance piece where I danced in 20 styles of the 20th century, so this was a kind of museum. Like I was like with my body a museum, but I showed it on theater stages, and then I started already like I made like works, but I didn't have anywhere to show them, like for museum guards. But people like the curators I mentioned, they kind of knew about this, and so then there was this kind of like dance festivals in museums. So it was this kind of interdisciplinary thing, like Martin Spangberg had organized something at Moderna Museet in Stockholm, and then I had shown these works, but for 2 days, because the dance festival was 2 days, but in the museum. And so that word kind of spread a little bit, and then my first ever exhibition, so now I'm coming to your second or first question, my first ever exhibition was, exhibition invitation was from Hans-Ulrich Obrist in 2001, Do It in Mexico City at Museo de Carrillo Gil. Yeah. And so part of that deal was anyway, like you write an instruction. Like you cannot install your own work. Like if Alejandra would be invited to do it, or maybe you were, she cannot come like here and set up her work, but you have to write an instruction. That was the game, you know? And it was a bit like strange coincidence that was my very first proper exhibition. But like you know now, like yeah, then I was, I don't know, maybe some of you know her, but I never, I think, actually met her, Pamela Echeverria. Do you know her? Yeah. So she was very kind, and I was always like, you know, very young, and saying like, I have to do this, we have to get the museum guards to do this movement and stuff. And she was like all on it, but then came the opening, and there were 1,000 people, and the museum guards were just like, whoa. And I think that was more or less the end of it, you know. and then yeah, I mean, Do It is a very specific case anyway, but of course I understood that it's not that easy to install my work. And then I think 1 year later I was invited to do the same work in Cologne, and then I installed it myself, and we paid the people, and I was there taking care of them, like Ayasi and Justin are now out there taking care of the work, you know. Was that too long, or was
Perfect. And you said something that's very important, and I think que creo que es bueno que la gente sepa que su exposición es como una exposición con objetos, por decirlo de alguna manera, es en horario de museo y todos los días que el museo está abierto, lo mismo la pieza que está en el andador, en la calle. Y sí, en ese entonces Pamela Echeverría era curadora del Carrillo Gil hace mucho tiempo, ¿cierto? Bueno, y quería preguntarte, hace unos años trabajamos con Yasnaya Elena Aguilar. Ella es lingüista y es escritora de la etnia mixteca de la región de Ayuc, en Oaxaca. Y ella defiende la tradición cultural mixteca de la oralidad. En algún momento se pensaba de estos grupos que, como no tenían la tradición escrita, tenían un menor desarrollo cultural que otras culturas prehispánicas, ¿no? Entonces ella es parte de un movimiento que defiende sus tradiciones y en este contexto también la oralidad como herramienta que mantiene viva la historia y la mantiene en expansión. Es decir, a diferencia de la historia escrita, la historia de los anales, que queda fija y presa de una sola visión, con un solo sesgo, como si quedara atrapada en la parcialidad, la historia oral o el relato, cada vez que es contada, toma una nueva vida, va llevando la energía de cada quien que la va contando. Entonces, hago toda digo todo esto porque quiero relacionarlo con tu trabajo. No se puede grabar, no se puede hacer registro, e insistes en la vivencia del momento y en la memoria. Entonces, ¿cómo ves? Pienso que comulgas con esta reflexión de Yasnaya Elena Aguilar y que tu trabajo, si se registrara, es decir, la importancia de que no se registre tu trabajo con esta idea. Me parece que no solo es importante la memoria, sino el momento presente, que esa es parte de la última pregunta, pero habiéndote contado esto de Yasnaya Aguilar, ¿qué piensas?
But what was the name? No, what was the main point of the linguist? One of you two. What was her main point?
Yes, that they were considered these ethnia mixtecos, that they didn't have they were less cultivated, to put it that way, than the people that had the historical writing tradition, and they just had it orally. So she's like comes from a group of resistance, and she's brilliant. And she says that orality is a way to keep history alive and keep history with a sense and energy that comes when people are telling it. You know, that the difference each people can put into the story. And when you put it by writing, it's like a little bit like killing it, because it's only one point of view, you know? So I was thinking about this and your work, and how can you relate your work to that?
I mean, in general, because, you know, first of all, thank you for coming here. The sun is shining outside and you're sitting in a dark theater. As we're here to, you know, like it's a talk with, you know, around my work, like I feel like I'd like to say something first. It's like, I think that this whole thing about not recording, unfortunately, is something which is a bit been overrated or like overemphasized by newspapers, you know, especially because they couldn't print a photo, we didn't provide a photo. But for me, it wasn't. For me, especially nowadays, it's not. And also at the beginning, I'm much more interested in what is it, you know, what is when two people are singing, you know, on the underdog and not is it now recorded or not, you know. Like for me, these questions are not so relevant, but I can say something quickly about it if that's the topic. I mean, first of all, I think that also in other traditions, like the Greek tradition, for example, Plato, he would think that like the oral transmission is more precise. Yeah? And so that would also be my reason. Like I have a number of reasons why I don't do it, and one reason is that that's the same for all of like dance, because I come from the dance tradition. Like, you're not going to learn a Balanchine ballet or Forsyth ballet by looking at a video. It's not going to work. Literally not going to work. Like, because there's so much things happening internally, like which muscles you use, what you're thinking, you know, to make it look like the way it looks like a real Balanchine or Forsyth ballet. Like, no video in the world is going to help. Like, help maybe, but it's not going to do the job, right? Like, if you see, also I've seen how Forsyth ballets were set in place. They have a video recorder on wheels, but there's a ballet master who's teaching it. And then sometimes she says, like, look here, but there's always a person, you know. Like, if you buy a Balanchine ballet, you're the ballet of I don't know where, you know, Australia or Mexico, then some Balanchine trust will send somebody. You know, like, it just simply doesn't work. So it's a practical thing. And then the other thing was that I was interested in the museum and the history of art for the reasons I kind of outlined a little bit earlier. And so I was clear, like, the moment I will make a photo of it, that will start circulating. That will find itself sometime in an exhibition or might be sold. So I had all this experience, let's say, from the neo-avant-gardes, which for very different reasons than my political reasons, you know. They try to evade the product, you know, where I try to evade the object, you know, that's the difference. But I could learn from the exhibition. They try to evade the product, but in the end, you know, is it now a so-called performance, or is it a bit of, I don't know, what is the Robert Barry work with the helium in the air, like at the end becomes a certificate, or Ian Wilson's Conversations, I saw many of these certificates on the walls of collectors' houses. So for me it was clear that, like, the best way to evade some of that being circulated in an exhibition was just not to produce it, you know? But it's not much more than that, so maybe we keep it here if that's okay, or we can talk about it later when we speak all together, which I hope we will. And unfortunately the light doesn't go higher than this. Or does it? Where is it now, though? I think it doesn't go, I think you put it the highest. It doesn't? But that's Bernardo. But Leonardo. Hola, Leonardo. This is 100%, no? Okay, well, this is what they call a theater. Yeah.
It's good.
Don't worry, Viviana. I just it was just a long-winded way of saying, like, I hope we can have a conversation.
Okay. So I'm going to go to another question. Voy a hacer otra pregunta. Me contaste lo interesante que te resultó la experiencia en Marrakech, en la plaza Jemaa El Fna en 2016, Jemaa Fna Square. En esta plaza se lleva a cabo una tradición centenaria llamada Jalca, que se hacía en el origen en el lugar donde los nómadas levantaban sus tiendas en el desierto. La gente se sentaba en círculo y cantaba, contaba historias, bailaba. Y entonces me contabas cómo fue una experiencia que más allá de solo ser una pieza de arte, porque fungiste como el malam, que son los maestros de las jalcas. Te volviste junto con tus intérpretes parte de esta tradición circular y que la gente se relacionó contigo de esa manera, te reconoció así, te respetaba así. Entonces me gustaría que nos hablaras de esta experiencia en relación con tu experiencia de estar en el Andador, aquí en el centro de Zapopan, porque justamente en el Andador, como saben, hay una tradición desde 1735, que es la romería, que involucra un poderosísimo ritual, involucra cultura y tradición. Entonces me interesa la comparación o lo que nos puedas decir entre estas dos experiencias y lo que ha sido tu experiencia aquí en Zapopan.
Yeah, that's a good question. Let's see if I have a good answer. I mean, first of all, like I tried to say, like, I had a certain discomfort when I was, you know, when I was a teenager, early 20s, with the ritual of the exhibition, right? Like, or the ritual of the museum. It's like, why are humans not in action? Why are we celebrating just things? That was my kind of take on it, for a couple of reasons, which I tried to outline a little bit, but we also don't have to go further into it. But you can say, and that this is something which doesn't come from me, like comes from museum studies, people like Carol Duncan or Tony Bennett, that the museum is a civilizing ritual, but we could also see, like, say, like, the museum is a Apollinian ritual. Like, it's a ritual which wants to, most ritual want to kind of, you know, are more Dionysiac. They want to kind of let the energies go high and excited or something, whatever word we can find. And the museum ritual wants to kind of make a more internal, discerning, aesthetic judgment ritual, more kind of a colder ritual, right? And so that also, you know, I grew up in Europe, and so I was a kind of, my relation to art was to art history also, because that was what I could access, the books about it, and I found this whole kind of chain of art history really fascinating, and I wanted to kind of see if I could, you know, play along. And so I was comfortable with that ritual also, because coming from theater, it allowed for participation. I could ask somebody a question on a Tuesday morning, so I made it a little bit warmer, you know, like early in my own way. Like, you come in the morning, Tuesday morning, to a museum in Eindhoven, and there's like 3 visitors and 1 person doing my work, and the person doing my work is asking you a question, which is the work somehow, you know? Like, there was a work called This is Exchange, where basically they offer you half of your entrance fee if you discuss your opinion on market economy with them, you know? And so I found my way in this ritual, but I was also very embedded in this kind of more Apollinian modality of the exhibition ritual, even if I made it maybe slightly warmer, you know, like people were looking at you, people were sometimes dancing and singing. And then when 2016 I came to Marrakesh, I didn't take it so serious. I mean, I felt it was an honor, like I think I was one of the very first foreigners to do something on Jamal Efna. And they had seen my work at Palais de Tokyo, and they decided they wanted to somehow bring this to Morocco. But then the experience was formative in the sense that I realized my work could also exist in a more, less Apollinian, let's say, modality, and a modality which also had no interest or in the notion of art. Like, the notion of art just wasn't really relevant there, you know? Like, we were in this old bank building doing some of my works. It looked like at EstaciónMAZ, I mean, different, but let's say it was a combination of works, more people, but then here, and people would just be hanging out. They wouldn't even necessarily be watching. They would just like come in, hang out, people were singing. And then in the evenings we would go onto the square, make a halka, and a halka is like a circle of people, and then different things happen, like snakes charming, or guitar playing, like this kind of, I forget the name, or transvestite shows, or somebody's giving a political speech. There's all different things which happen in halka. The square is huge. Maybe some of you have been there. Has somebody been to Jamal? If not, it's a huge, I don't know, it's like, I would say it's like, yeah, it's like 10 football fields or something. It's like really big. And everywhere you have like these kind of circles of people, and something is happening in the middle. And so in the evening, like Justin was there also, who's here. Then we did our own halka, which was much more like upbeat, you know, we're singing, dancing, full force, quickly, loudly, you know, all the kind of excited energies. But both inside this old bank building, which was more like during the day for 8 hours, like exhibition modality, as well as on the square, I realized like, actually, like the notion of art is something which was created at some point, you know? Like, I mean, sculpture, painting, architecture, decoration, weaving, all of that has always existed, but this notion of art, which exists since a few hundred years with the museum, and that actually I got a more embodied feel for, like, that it is also a construction, and that if this construction isn't there, things still continued somehow. And in particular, of course, like my work continued. So then when we were talking and I understood that, you know, there's this underdoor, and I didn't fully understand that, like I understood recently underdoor means walking street, but it was a street without cars, and then I thought, okay, like since also Morocco, I did a few of these things outside with a bigger group always, and that today it's interesting for me to, you know, at my age to communicate just with all types of people, not only in this kind of art game, and also with a larger number of people. You know? Because I do feel the pressure from the internet, the pressure of social media. I still grew up in a time where when you showed in a big museum, in a solo show, that was the cultural, that was a cultural event, that was a cultural event which was somehow broadcasted, you know? And then there was nothing else broadcasted. I mean, there were other cultural events like theater, cinema, films, but there was not like every one of us, like let's say in a talk like this, I would be the only one, like when I started, I would be the only one of the few, like Alejandra and like maybe 3-4 others, we were professional creators of meaning in public, right? There would be maybe 4 or 5 of us, but a small fraction of us in this room would be somebody who have like an access to a production of meaning in the public sphere through, I mean, a creative, aesthetic production of meaning. You know, of course, if a politician is here or something, they have also a way of, you know, speaking in public. But this kind of composed meaning in public, that was I grew up, I still was professional, let's say, at a time when this was reserved for a few. And now all of us can literally, like in this room, broadcast something. You know, maybe somebody is doing some kind of live. I don't think so. But like, I see Sam holding up a phone. Yeah, Sam, are you broadcasting something? No, but you could be, right? I have no way of knowing. So I do feel this pressure of like, that there's much, I don't know if this makes sense to you, but like, that like as a professional artist for a long time now, like, I feel like that what we are doing has become much less relevant just because there's much more things which are relevant, you know? And so for me, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I feel more at ease when I'm like on the underdoor and in communicating with all types of people, like the internet communicates with all types of people, and I'm communicating with them in a direct, live, embodied thing, which the internet cannot. And then it's also more, a larger group of people. But that's just me. I mean, I don't know if this is a good thinking, but that's just where I'm at, you know.
Sí, llevamos mucho tiempo queriendo trabajar con Tino y cuando empezamos a platicar, justo cuando le dije del andador, que eran 2 museos que se comunicaban con un andador peatonal, fue cuando creo que quedó atrapado y le empezó a interesar, ¿no? Y bueno, la siguiente pregunta creo que la contestaste un poco con esta respuesta. Lo que te quería preguntar, o que quiero preguntar, es que después de 25 años, ¿cómo ha cambiado tu visión? Y si lo que querías comunicar sigue siendo lo mismo, ¿cómo ha evolucionado tu manera de ver las cosas? Que ya lo contestaste un poco, pero si quieres profundizar, pues sí, cómo deja de ser tal vez tan importante el museo, la noción del arte, llegar a más gente, otro tipo de gente, no sé si podemos ahondar en eso. Y la voy a unir con la última pregunta para que después, pues, si quieres hablar de otra cosa tú o abramos el micrófono. Me gustaría que nos contaras el papel que tiene el tiempo presente en tu obra. Para mí, desde un punto de vista personal, el estar en el presente es algo que estoy intentando ejercitar, y con tu trabajo y en la presencia de tus obras, creo que es una especie de entrada, de espacio para poder estar en este tiempo presente, ¿no? Como cuando te atrapa tu obra, ¿no? Cuando llega alguien y te cuenta la historia, o cuando de pronto empiezan a cantar o a moverse rapidísimo, que te toman por sorpresa, como un maestro budista dándole un latigazo a uno de sus alumnos a lo mejor. Son comparaciones que yo hago de manera personal, pero es como una entrada a este momento de eternidad, por ponerlo en ese sentido. Y quisiera saber si en algún momento tú tiene esto alguna relevancia en tu trabajo o no lo ves de esa manera.
Does what exactly have significance? And what was the part about the Buddhist and this I didn't put in?
No, it was a comparison I was making, because there's a story I know that there was some pupils with the Buddhist teacher that one of them was doing like this to a bell, tocando una campana, and he was super with his attention really focused, and then a beautiful woman passed and he got distracted. And then the teacher le dio un latigazo, whipped him, and then he died from a heart attack. But the story is that the master knew that he was going to die, so he whipped him for him to die, focus on his attention, because he got gotten distracted, you know? So, my question is that I believe, and I have experience with your work, that there can be this kind of moments when you are in a, I don't want to sound like crazy or cheesy, but like you can access another dimension or another, it's like a portal or something like that. That it's yeah.
Let's say it like this, like, I'm happy to listen to you, right? Like, and I'm very happy about what you say, but I wouldn't claim to these things. And I think one thing that attracted me to art, also somebody who was like, growing up, like, I never related to art, like as a teenager. I wasn't good at art in school, like it wasn't a modality, like I thought I would become something else, you know? And like something a little bit less in the aesthetic, maybe a little bit more in the political or something. But what attracted me to art was also something that I found very 21st century is that like it's a network thing, in the sense that like, and this like different people have talked or written about this, is like the artist proposes something, but that's not enough for art to exist. Art needs the reception, the critic or the visitor or something. And like Ludwig Fleck, the first historian of science, writes about that the core of art, there's two cores. Like art has two cores, where science has one. Yeah, and the core of science is, for example, like the experiment in the lab, you know, whereas the core of art has two cores, which is the reception or the critic, and the proposal, the production, you know, the artwork, and so and these two come into a kind of tension or a kind of oscillation or something, and then art arises. So I found that, like if you say like the 20th century and the 19th century were this ideology of the discrete entity, which might not make sense, but I'm trying to keep it a bit short, like the autonomous discrete entity. And the 21st century is maybe more about the connected, about relations and connections, you know, and also in philosophy, in the interconnectedness of society, you know, like, then I found art was a bit, like the mode of art was more interesting. I didn't feel so comfortable, and I still don't feel so comfortable, like I wouldn't want to write a text and say, this is my point. Because if you write a text, like as a scientist, you write like, this is my point. Whereas I'm much more comfortable to like make a proposal, which to me has a certain modesty, and this modesty is a way, a kind of precision, maybe, towards the complexity of society or the complexity of life. It's not about being modest or humble for the sake of being humble only, which is, you know, spiritually a virtue and it's all good. But it's not about that, it's about being precise, you know, and the precise thing is that I don't fully know, you know, and that, but like I might have a perspective and I can propose this perspective and then I can see what other people do with this proposal or perspective and stuff, and then something might arise, you know, so I'm quite comfortable still in this position. Is it now an effective position? Is it as relevant as it used to be? I don't know, but I'm not really, I wouldn't be so happy, you know, like, I'm happier listening to you, reacting to something that I proposed, which I don't fully know what I'm proposing, which is part of the thing as an artist is also like you don't, I think the more you do it, you know, also sometimes you have to trust what your subconscious is bringing up, you know, and then if it's a great gift if somebody says, well, I had an experience with whatever you're proposing, like I still feel a little bit, I don't know what to say, like timid or like, sometimes I can't believe that people actually have an experience with something I propose, you know, even after so many years. But I'm also happy that it's, you know, that you seem to have an experience and then I like to listen to it. But I wouldn't claim to things so much, you know, like I have certain ideas, of course, I've worked in different cultures, I have my own, you know, like interests in spirituality or, you know, knowledge, but I wouldn't claim too much, you know, art can stay experimental, like it's a place where you can just propose something and then that's what I like about it. It's quite an open place though. You propose something and people are like, okay, we see, I relate, I don't relate, okay. It doesn't have to work. That's why I also don't feel so comfortable in theaters, because theaters do have to work. If you make people sit for an hour still in the dark, it kind of has to be a bit entertaining. Whereas in art, it's like, okay, not working, ciao, just keep on walking, you know?
Yeah, my question was just not that you claim it, but if you had this sense of things, and yes, you answered. Thank you. So I don't know if you want to say anything else, or should we open the...
No, I'm happy if somebody wants to say something too. I mean, like I said, we cannot make it more light, and but if there's a question or a comment, it's nice to talk together again. Like, nice that you're spending a Saturday morning in the dark. Maybe we have like the sound of silence. What's your name? You use the sound. Huh? Huh?
Hola. Bueno, yo quisiera hacer un par de comentarios muy breves y después una pregunta. He seguido de alguna forma por muchos años tu trabajo y creo que algunos de ellos, sobre todo los que se han desarrollado en espacios públicos, es decir, que hay personas que no necesariamente o no originalmente son público y tienen esta experiencia de encontrarse con estas, valga la redundancia, experiencias, son una especie de regalo. Y creo que es algo como muy fuerte, muy importante en tu trabajo, ese regalo, esa experiencia que puede ser mínima, puede ser de un tiempo breve, pero que puede ser sumamente potente y gratificante para esa persona o para una comunidad. Creo que eso es algo un común que he visto a lo largo de distintos trabajos. Y por otra parte, me parece muy interesante la información que se comunica sobre tu trabajo cuando, a diferencia de, pues obviamente ya lo mencionaron, de muchos performance y acciones que hay, alguna fotografía. De por sí el performance y la acción pues siempre es un poco mitificadora, ¿no? O sea, le ponemos un poco de más cuando decimos fui a un performance y sucedió esto, o cuando leemos en ciertos libros, pues por ejemplo, no sé, que había una audiencia de 130 personas y a lo mejor había 13 personas, ¿no? Pero aquí además no existen esos documentos, esas fotografías, y quienes nos ha interesado tu trabajo, vamos hablando sobre él, como agregando también capas de información y de interpretación. Entonces se va haciendo una obra muy compleja, quizá en muchas ocasiones incluso distante a los orígenes más puntuales que tú querías compartir, pero a mí finalmente me parece muy interesante. Y en ese sentido, para cerrar con la pregunta, sí, con la pregunta es, si nos puedes platicar un poco sobre tu obra en el Jardín Botánico de Culiacán, obra de la que muchas y muchos compañeros hemos platicado y que seguramente ya la hemos reinterpretado y ya la hemos platicado muy distinta a lo que fue, pero pues si nos puedes platicar un poquito de esa obra que sucedió ahí. Muchas gracias y felicidades por tu trabajo.
Thank you and congratulations on your T-shirt, right? Tell me your name again. Huh?
Israel Martinez.
Israel, okay, thank you. Can you show your T-shirt because it's so nice?
No veo the sound of silence.
It's like the sound of silence and the notes have fallen down, no? What is your name?
Emmy.
So you made the T-shirt?
No, I just buy it.
Okay. Yeah. So no, I like the. For me, it's very. I like the sound of silence. That's why I come to it, because that's not an answer to your question, but something that I'm interested in. That like silence is something that, let's say, if we try to produce silence, everybody of us has the same power. Yeah. So we all agreed, like we produced like 3 seconds of silence, we all agreed. But if one of you doesn't agree, you have the same power as Viviana or me, you know? And to me, that was always politically interesting somehow, like that somehow at the end of the day, like maybe in the sense of Spinoza or I don't know what, like we all have a power in creating society, and the sound of silence, it's something I experienced as a young dancer because it's part of a Jérôme Bell piece. You know, The Show Must Go On, you know this piece? And then there's a moment where he plays the sound of silence, and then when they say the sound of, and there's nothing on stage, I think it's even dark. And then it's up to the audience to decide, you know, if the sound of silence will exist or not. I worked in that as a young dancer, so that's, and I find politically very, I don't know what the right word is, but true somehow. Anyway, then This You is the work I made for the Culiacán Botanical Garden, you know, invited by Isabel and Agustin Coppel in 2006. And basically it's a person, a woman standing by a path, and when she sees you from like a distance, like let's say 10-15 minutes distance, she whatever her impression is of you, you know, whatever impression she has, be it rational, be it intuitive, be it come from her experience, she sings something for you, which whatever you kind of, so every person gets a different song or a different melody, can be improvised, can be an existing song, and then yeah, like it was the first thing I did outside, so in that sense it was important for me, more important than, no, I won't say more important, but a better experience than do it in Mexico City. But it was the first work I did outside, and it's a work which continues to be shown also, which, yeah, and it has a lot of like serendipitous, is that the right word? Like serendipitous moments, you know, where people sing something which relates very precisely to this life situation of somebody who's listening to it. There's a lot of stories like that. But now why is that the case? And do I know something about that? No. But am I motivated to show this work again also for that reason? Yes. You know? Rafael.
Primero, Tino, quiero darte las gracias por hacerme parte de tu obra. Y yo he tenido la experiencia de ser espectador de la obra y de ser parte de la obra. Entonces son experiencias que para mí han sido diferentes, han sido maravillosos. Y mi pregunta es, ¿de dónde surgen eso? ¿Cómo surge cada una de las cosas que nosotros hacemos y que tú exhibes? Porque un pintor dice, vi este paisaje, tomé esta parte, el escultor de una persona, pero Tino, ¿de dónde toma para hacer cada una de estas cosas? Si se puede saber.
I mean, on the one hand, it's a question which you can't really answer. On the other hand, of course, like in art, we celebrate the individual artists, but of course, on a level of craft, of a level of understanding, like of course, there's many generations and people before, you know, like which you also build upon, which you take from, you know. And I guess I have two traditions, you know, like. There's a tradition of, let's say, dance on stage, which I followed a lot, which I was educated in, and there are lots of people which were influential to me, you know, like which I learned from. Let me think, like, who I could mention, but Trisha Brown was very important to me, and Trisha Brown was very dominant in a way when I grew up. Like everybody wanted to dance like Trisha Brown. Like half of that contemporary dance world basically danced like Trisha Brown, if they knew it or not. Ivan Reiner was like our kind of, you know, like our go-to person in the group. And so this whole idea of like a kind of non-educated, non-virtuous body, like that you are participating in my work, is not. Doesn't come out of nowhere. What is your job, Rafael? You're a doctor? What are you? Doctor, yeah. Surgeon, okay. So the idea that like a surgeon can participate in a kind of, I don't know what it is, dance work that of course comes from people like Ivan Reiner, Steve Paxton, no? And then that generation, then I worked with a choreographer called Christine Smet, which really did big projects with big groups. It was the project called 9x9 in each city. She would assemble 81 people and do, like, for example, 81 people over 60, or 81 people with a small baby, or just 81 people, you know, like, and so that was one of my first jobs as a dancer. So I somehow very early learned how to work with people like you know, and so it doesn't come out of nowhere. And then in art, I would say, like, yeah, like there's a lot of things which were influential to me, like Michael Escher, which is not so known anymore, I guess, nowadays. Marcel Brotas, you know, somehow you could create your own museum. But so many artists, like when we go down to the floor, which they're doing right now, it's also a little bit like Richard Long, no? Like I was joking to Viviana, this is my Richard Long, you know, like the art is always like a way of, I mean, you can look at any artist, they're always kind of, in some way or another, taking from what has come before them, you know, like, but of course the key thing is to transform it, you know, it's not enough to just repeat what has done before, it's to somehow transform it, but it doesn't come out of nowhere, you know, like the whole idea of, you know, González Torres did it, Richard Long did it, like to have a sculpture on the floor, you know, that was something that probably, you know, influenced me. And then there were a lot of theater directors, which I won't mention because you won't know them.
This version, when, for example, yesterday that Suri was lifted, and they were walking like in a procession. Is that your new little Romeria?
Yeah. But also, you know, I'm not sure about it, you know, and this is what I like about art. I can put something in public, and then I start looking around, you know. I start looking around, like, and then I didn't want to necessarily show it. Then Justin said, let's do this now. It's short. Then I understand Justin thinks it's worthwhile. So let's do it. And then then I start to see like what other people say. So I really think of it in this kind of communication. That doesn't mean that I don't know what I want to do, but like I do give myself also when I'm older the space to try out things, you know. But I couldn't say something like if I'm totally sure about that scene. But yeah, maybe some of you will tell me about it later.
¿Alguien más?
Hola, bueno, creo que estoy procesando todavía toda la información que nos compartiste. Bueno, por un lado me parece muy importante poder dar una connotación política a una pieza de arte sin tener que dar como un statement muy explícito. Creo que en este caso, especialmente en esta pieza aquí en el MAZ, pues es el hecho de que la pieza no pueda ser reproducida, ¿no? Entonces, como mencionabas, al quitar los objetos de esta ecuación y pues que no se puede reproducir ni siquiera a través de una fotografía, lo que sea, la pieza solo existe en ese momento, en ese lugar. Pero creo que no es tan fácil librarnos de los objetos. Creo que como el problema del materialismo no necesariamente son los objetos, sino es la idea que tenemos de estos objetos. Y entonces, en la pieza, al quitarle el objetivo a la cosa, como el objeto tiene un objetivo que cumplir, ¿no? Entonces, cuando se lo retiras, ¿en qué se convierte? Y entonces sigue teniendo una presencia indirecta, porque aunque no haya objetos, le quitas ese objetivo y se convierte como en un no objeto. No sé si se entiende esto, como la teoría de los no lugares, como que hay no lugares, esto es un no objeto. Y pues en el panorama del arte global, uno de los principales objetivos en general de las piezas de arte es la mediación, ¿no? Que lleguen a una mediación y un alcance como global. Pero creo que este es un ejemplo de que tal vez es necesario más bien que tengan un punto de vista diferente de un alcance más bien local, como una anestesia local, como un problema específico, no necesariamente querer abarcar como el todo. Creo que ya me perdí un poco, perdón. Pero sí, hablabas también de los sacrificios, como de los rituales en ese trabajo. Y de nuevo tomando esta idea que del objetivo de los objetos, al retirar y sacrificar el que cumple con su objetivo, es como este ritual en el que se sacrifica ese objeto y se convierte como en algo sagrado. Entonces ese momento que se convierte en la pieza en sí, que es sagrado porque dura solo ese momento de tiempo, me parece como creo que es lo que lo hace. O sea, lo poético se convierte en político en ese momento, porque deja de formar parte de todo lo que en este momento el arte quiere cumplir. Entonces, bueno, estamos como viviendo en una situación geopolítica muy complicada, donde, como decías, todo lo que hacemos parece no importar tanto y se pierde mucho en la mediación, y creo que para los artistas te pone en un punto muy complicado, ¿no? Hacia dónde deberías llevar como tu práctica, si realmente importa lo que estás haciendo, produciendo. Pero entonces, pues no sé, tú como un artista que sí ya forma parte como de las instituciones del arte, que ya está como validado, no sé cómo piensas, o sea, ¿qué piensas del futuro del arte? Tal cual, como creo que se puede acabar.
Okay, I think I got something that I can say. Is it helpful or relevant for you? I don't know, but like, I think first of all, my work is reproducible, right? Like it is a kind of product. It is a commodity, if you want to use that kind of vocabulary. You know, it can be reproduced by repetition. You know, like what they're doing right now is something they've done before. They did it yesterday and they will do it tomorrow. And you know, like if somebody wants to, if some city would want to buy it and say, like, we're going to show this on our underdoor for the next 10 years, then probably we would go with it, you know? Or like, so in that sense it's a product, it's reproducible. In that sense it's different from what like from the neo-avant-gardes, you know, which at some point had this idea that they don't want to produce a product, then they did, and then they bought a house with it, you know? But that's another story. And then will art exist in the future? I think that probably not. You know, like, I mean, art emerged in a certain moment, like with the advent of museums. This notion of art that we're still working with here now, you know, and probably it will slowly evolve, you know, and that doesn't mean maybe it will be not totally lost, but also today I feel like we're already in a more, maybe less in a mode of art, more in a mode of creativity, of creative events, creative manifestations, you know, of all kinds. And is it now a sofa? Is it a pair of sneakers? Is it a video? Is it inside an exhibition? Is it on the screen? Is it a big concert? Like, there are many cultural, creative entities, and they are all kind of the same or of similar. We don't have this hierarchy anymore, which we used to have of like high culture and like pop culture. This is already used to be like, yeah. Maybe I leave it at that, you know? So in that sense, maybe art already doesn't exist in the same way anymore. But these are also like this kind of rhetorical statements one can make. At the end of the day, we all don't know, I would say, you know? It's up to you guys. Maybe one more or none more.
Aquí, Susana.
There's one here in the front.
Bueno, primero que nada estoy muy agradecida de escuchar a Tino, que es uno de mis artistas favoritos. Y bueno, Tino, tu trabajo me parece sumamente interesante, tiene como un espectro muy grande de conceptos y de sensibilidades que me gustan mucho. Y yo estoy muy curiosa respecto a que en el arte hay muchos aspectos, está la creación, está la ejecución, etcétera, etcétera, y está el mundo del arte. ¿Cómo manejas este sentido del mundo del arte cuando lo insertas a un mercado? ¿Cómo es que logras vender tus obras? Porque perdón, no sé qué pasó, pero bueno, estábamos platicando de cómo es que logras vender tus obras. Yo tenía entendido, había leído, había investigado que cuando vendes una de tus obras no hay contratos, no hay ningún certificado de autenticidad, no hay nada más que pura cosa verbal, ¿no? Es un contrato oral, es un contrato entre 2 o 3 personas, no sé si haya testigos, no sé cómo logras esta transacción cuando estamos tan acostumbrados a comprar algo y poseer ese objeto. En este sentido no está poseyendo nada más que una idea. Y respecto a eso, también leí varias críticas, ¿no? También me gustaría saber cómo manejas esa crítica hacia tu trabajo, de que hacen alusión a la venta de trajes invisibles al rey, ¿no? ¿Cómo manejas este tipo de aspectos en tu trabajo? Bueno, gracias.
I mean, it's interesting, you said there's no contract, and then you said later there's no. First of all, thank you for your words, and But it was interesting, your question, you said there's no contract, later you said there's no written contract. So that's exactly the answer, like there is a contract, it's just that it's verbal. Like when you go into a restaurant, you sit down, it's not written, not verbal, it's just you sit down, and the moment you sit down and you order, you're in a contract, right? Because if you just say like, oh, I didn't sign anything, I didn't agree with you, anything, I can just leave. Like, no, you can't just leave, you know? And there will be consequences if you don't pay your bill at the restaurant. So that would be an example of like a contract which is not even verbal. So I do an oral contract, it's kind of standardized. We do the same thing since 25 years. It's like the work can only be installed by somebody authorized to install the work. The work has to be shown for the entire opening hours of an exhibition. You know, the people have to be paid like this and this amount, minimum, like take into consideration inflation, and there's like 2-3 more. And then basically, let's say if we take the example of Culiacan, the botanical garden, what did they buy? They bought the rights to show this work whenever they want. So for the last 10 years, unfortunately, they didn't choose to make use of this right. But if they call me tomorrow after this talk and say people in the audience were asking about this hue in Culiacan and we want to show it again, then I personally am obliged, you know, legally to kind of, not necessarily myself, but in some way make sure that the thing can be shown again. You know, they have most of the knowledge to show it, so in that sense it's not a problem, but after 10 years or something that they didn't show it, I think the knowledge can also be a bit lost, and then it's back to my team to help them install it, or somebody to go there, install it, etc. And then there was a second part of the question. Oh, critics, yeah, no, like I always enjoyed it. That relates to what I said earlier. Like I propose something and people make sense of it or misunderstand it. I don't really think there can be a misunderstanding, it's reception. So I always have a big respect for whatever people say. Is it now positive or negative for me? Is not really, of course on a personal level makes a difference, but I think that also the critics are in a very, very tough place. You know, like this is something which I could have never imagined, that like curators still exist, artists still exist, but critics, there's no real economy for critics. I mean, in my time, it went really, you know, even the length of the articles in the newspaper went like slimmer and slimmer. It was more about previewing the show, writing a portrait of the artist rather than actually reviewing the artwork. And I tried to resist this process a little bit, like saying like, no, please, I don't want to do an interview, like maybe, you know, like if you want to speak to me, maybe a quote is fine. Like, I mean, we didn't say it so explicitly, but in some way or another we say like we prefer an article than an interview, because that's the game of like what I was talking earlier, proposal, reception. So I hope that there can be, I mean, people who are professional or were professional in the art critic, in the field of art critics, they will know more about me, but now more about this, but like than me. But I think it's a field which has really declined. Now the economy has declined, and so that's today also in the kind of ocean of information there is about everything. Like to criticize one thing makes less sense, because what it makes sense is to just even highlight the thing, you know? Like in that sense, what is the influencer? The influencer is somebody who points at something in the sea of information. This is how I would understand it. And it's not like for a critic to really, the word of the critic makes more sense if you have 10 things and only 10 things exist, and then you start talking about these 10 things. I like this one, but not this one, for this and this reason. This is the right political, like that made sense, you know? Like I remember stories from, let's say, the 80s in Germany where they would like fight about artists and artworks, and there would be huge debates. I mean, this is difficult to imagine nowadays, you know? Because if it's not interesting, okay, whatever, I didn't even hear about it. What is the name again? Okay, yeah, oh yeah, right, whatever, you know? That's more 2020. Yeah.
Well, it It was shown, I don't know if you remember Claudia, Susana, or Israel, it was shown at Tamayos not some years ago, no, not 10 years ago.
This year was around Amaya, yeah, it's true.
Yeah, okay. There's another question over here.
Yo como
And
espectador.
Franco.
But then we're so really close, no? Because then I feel like if people have stayed in the dark for a long time.
Alejandro y Franco.
Yo solamente no necesito ni micrófono ni nada. Como espectador, lo que quiero decir es como el agradecimiento como espectador de lo que genera tu trabajo en las emociones, en estas situaciones que te sacan de la cotidianidad, que vienes a un teatro, a un museo y no esperas encontrarte con esto. Incluso este cuarto oscuro en el otro museo, como muy disruptor también. Y a mí lo que me queda de tu trabajo es como todo lo que mueve de emociones, ¿no? Es como, me siento como agradecida de que nos sorprendas y nos saques de la cotidianidad.
Gracias, gracias. Then we have one more, then maybe we can end, no?
Yes.
If it's two, then maybe we can do two, like one after the other, and then and then maybe I can try to bundle them.
Hi, I here, center. Which I am curious about a small detail. Do you care about objects which are inevitably brought into your pieces by interpreters? What role do you think these objects play in the production of meaning in your pieces? Are they irrelevant? Are some things bad? Yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I didn't really know your work or your art before I saw it yesterday, and it reminded me of this thing in the Mori Art Museum in Japan where you'd take a flower that at the end of the route you would give it to a new entrant that was coming into the show. I was just really curious with something like this associations that, you know, Maya has told me it's been shown in London and it's been shown in here, but I'm really curious how this configuration would work maybe in a place like Finland or Japan or Korea. Just your thoughts, like where people are a lot less expressive and you know, are really open to sharing such personal things. That's, yeah, thank you.
Remind me now my brain was not working. What was the last part of your question?
What role do you?
No, that was yeah. Okay, great. I got it. Yeah, I think it's a very good question, and yes, there are objects, and these associations, like as a title, is also part of my, let's say, Bunalatur reception. You know, like that. Of course, there cannot be a space without objects. You know, it's a bit of a self-critique also. But like, there's the architecture, there's the lights, there's the clothes, there's the shoes. And recently I also did a work which actually involves objects called this Entry, and there's like a ball, a bicycle, and a violin in the work. And then, so I don't know where you were heading at with the question, and I don't know if I have a good answer, but I think my feeling is like you're right, yeah. Of course, there's lots of objects which play a role, and also objects play a role in our life. And let's say, where am I? Nowadays, it's more like that. What status do we give to them? Like, to keep it short, like, do we put them on a pedestal and autonomize them, or are there things that we are, which help us in our communication, which help us with our communication with ourselves? You know. But I don't know if that's a good. If that's now the best way of saying it. And then in terms of like different cultures, I think that when I first did these associations, like basically I asked the participants questions like, what is something you're dissatisfied with yourself, or what is something you're satisfied with yourself, or when did you have a sense of arrival? And I didn't really think that it would be so intimate and personal like it then became in very many different cultures. But I think it's about the anonymity of the situation, which I underestimated. Like, that when I first did it, I didn't think as far that like I'm creating an anonymous situation between two people who are speaking to each other but both don't know who each other are, they don't know their names, there's no social consequences in telling something, like literally zero, like in most cases, like they have no way of knowing who this person is, they're not gonna see them again. So and then like Viviana, also you told me, no, like Viviana participated once in the rehearsal, and in that sense there were social consequences because they knew who you were, but the kind of the situation has a dynamic where you start telling things, you'd rather tell something intimate in this kind of anonymized or artificial situation, but I also don't really know why. But now, of course, after 14 years of doing this project, you know, once in a while, like, we expect that, but I really don't know what people are saying. Like, literally don't know. Like, sometimes when people come up to me, I take the occasion to, like, I might ask you later, you know, what did the person tell you yesterday? But like, you know, I don't know. But it's still called my work, but I have no idea.
Pues muchas gracias. Les invitamos a ver la exposición en EstaciónMAZ y These Associations en el Andador 20 de noviembre en horarios del museo. Y ahorita va a empezar, o está empezando, una visita guiada de la escalera y sotirar la casa con Alejandra Laviada. Los invitamos a verla. ¿Me falta decir algo más, Maya? ¿No? Pues muchas gracias. Muchas gracias, Tino.
Gracias.
Gracias.